watched her shove that yellowed receipt across the table and declare, "You stole my family's legacy," in a voice loud enough to shatter glass. I remember the hush that fell over the courtroom like a heavy curtain. I felt my palms go clammy. I saw the judge's gavel glint under the harsh overhead lights. I felt my heart pound so hard I thought it might echo off the walls. What was she thinking? I asked myself, voice trembling behind clenched teeth, and then I saw my grandfather's eyes, steady and accusing, fixed on me from the witness box. I froze. I couldn't breathe. The bailiff shuffled papers, the audience leaned forward, and my lawyer's hand squeezed mine for a moment before letting go. How did things spiral so fast? I thought, every nerve screaming. Then came the question that would change everything. Did I, a devoted grandson, really betray my own blood? And then, nothing but the judge's impatient clearing of his throat. The moment stretched into an unbearable pause. What would I say next? I remember the days before any of this, when my biggest worry was whether I'd remembered to pack my daughter's lunch. I'm Michael Hayes, paralegal by trade, single. Father by choice, grandson by honor. I lived in a modest townhouse on Elm Street with Rosa, my bright-eyed 7-year-old, and my 82-year-old grandfather, Henry. I worked 6 days a week at Donovan and Prescott, where I filed motions and brewed too much coffee. Weekends were hours, pancake Sundays, library Tuesdays, bedtime stories in a makeshift fort. I was content, I often thought, until the day our family's legacy shattered. I woke each morning to the gold light of dawn spilling through our kitchen window. I'd pour myself a cup of black coffee, no sugar, no cream, and head to Granddad's, workshop at the back of the yard. He'd be bent over a table scattered with yellowing papers, antique tools and journals bigger than my head. "Morning, Mike," he'd grunt, offering a nod and a half-smile that crinkled his eyes. I'd hand him coffee in a chipped mug and listen as he told stories of our ancestors, shipwrights who crossed oceans, jewelers who crafted crowns for kings. I was proud, I'd think, watching his weathered hands trace faded ink. I'd walk Rosa to school in the amber glow of autumn leaves, her small hand curled in mine. We'd pass neighbors waving hello, Mrs. Patel tending her rose bushes, Mr. Delgado jogging with his dog, Sarah from across the street checking on us. Our town was small, but alive, each face familiar and kind. At Donovan and Prescott, I sat at a desk cluttered with case files and sticky notes. My boss, Karen Prescott, called me the heart of this place, though she'd never say it in front of clients. I'd smile at her behind her back. I belonged, I thought, as I stamped documents and researched precedents late into the night. Evenings were the best. I'd pick up Rosa, whose laughter rang clear as bells, and head home for taco nights. Granddad would join us in his faded armchair, nodding off between bites of salsa-dipped tortilla. He never spoke much at dinner, but his presence was our anchor. I'd brush Rosa's hair before bed, whispering stories of brave ancestors. I'd kiss her forehead, flick off the hallway light, and collapse on the couch beside Granddad's snores. It was perfect. Then came the afternoon I found the envelope. I was filing our family papers, something Granddad asked me to do once a month, when I saw it tucked beneath a stack of invoices from the 1940s. The paper was brittle, the edges frayed. I slid my finger across faded script. Property of Eleanor, Montgomery Hayes. My grandmother's name. My heart skipped. I opened it and discovered a single sheet. An antique receipt dated March 12, 1948, listing heirlooms my great-grandmother sold under duress. Why hadn't I seen this before? I wondered, tracing the ink with a fingertip. I took it to Granddad that evening. He peered through his glasses, jaw tightening. "That's proof," he whispered, voice low but fierce. I blinked at him, waiting for the punchline. What proof? But he wouldn't tell me more. Instead, he tucked the receipt into his breast pocket and walked away, shoulders rigid. I watched him shuffle toward his workshop door, lantern in hand, and wondered what shadows he carried in his past. I tried to forget it over the next few days. I focused on court filings, on Rose's spelling tests, on Granddad's storytelling sessions by lamplight. But the receipt lingered in my mind like a half-heard melody, pulling at questions I couldn't silence. What was I missing? Then, one morning, everything changed. I arrived at the courthouse, briefcase in hand, coffee cup in tow, and I saw her. My sister, Olivia, standing beneath the marble columns in a tailored gray suit. She gripped that same yellowed paper in her hand. The slit of her mouth was tight, her eyes cold. Why is she here? And then, the clerk called my name. I took a shaky breath. What would happen next? I stepped into the courtroom and felt every eye on me. I swallowed. I felt the edges of my vision go hazy. I heard the whisper of my suit against the wooden pew. I've got this, I told myself. Then I saw Olivia's lips curl as she extended that receipt toward the judge. Your Honor, she began, voice steady and cold. This document proves my brother misappropriated family heirlooms. I froze. I felt blood rush to my cheeks. Heirlooms? I thought. I've never touched a single piece. My palms twitched against my briefcase handle, and then Olivia glanced at Granddad in the witness box, his face impassive, eyes hidden by the rim of his glasses. He's playing along. I opened my mouth to speak, but the judge raised a hand. The gavel hammered once, sharp as a knife. Proceed, he commanded. Olivia laid out her argument with surgical precision. Between 2018 and 2024, Michael Hayes sold or pawned several items belonging to our grandmother's estate, including a jade brooch, a silver locket, and a carved ivory hairpin. I watched the judge's eyebrows knit together. None of that is true, I thought, but the words stuck in my throat. Then Olivia produced bank statements, withdrawals labeled pawn shop, handwritten notes I'd never seen. She narrated them like a storyteller on stage, voice smooth and rehearsed. I felt my chest tighten. My lawyer, Mr. Ellison, leaned over and whispered, "These came from your office files. How do you explain that?" My heart pounded. My files? I thought. How did she get them? I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. Your Honor, I began, but my voice cracked. The courtroom shifted. I heard the murmur of the spectators, the rustle of papers. Olivia smiled, a triumph masked by calm professionalism. Why is she doing this? I wondered, hands trembling. What does she gain? And then she leaned forward and said, My brother's office computer was last accessed by him. These files are internal, not from the public record. Only someone with access and motive could extract them. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I looked at Mr. Ellison, whose face was tight with concern. I'm screwed, I thought, the words unfurling like smoke in my mind. After a recess, Granddad took the stand again. I watched him straighten his shoulders as he adjusted the pocket that held the antique receipt. He cleared his throat, his voice low. Your Honor, I provided this receipt to Michael last week at my request, he said, so he could catalog and protect our family's history. I did not intend for it to be used against him. I blinked. Against me? I thought. What's he protecting? The prosecution seized on that. They asked my grandfather if he had reason to distrust me. He hesitated, eyes flicking away, and finally said, I began to wonder if Michael was hiding something. I felt my stomach drop to my knees. I heard Rosa's laugh in my mind, bright and innocent. They're turning him against me, I realized, dread pooling in my chest. I took the stand after a brutal cross-examination. I stood at the witness podium, my suit feeling like armor too heavy to lift. I placed my trembling hands on the rail. I have never sold a single family heirloom, I said, voice wavering but clear. I described my days filing briefs, my weekends reading to Rosa, my nights reorganizing Granddad's journals. I spoke of loyalty, of love. I watched the judge's eyes narrow, then soften. Maybe I reached him, I thought. Then Olivia's lawyer pounced. Mr. Hayes, you testified that you cataloged these items, yet none were found in your files. How do you explain that? I felt my throat tighten. My mind raced. Why are they missing? I thought. Where did they go? I forced myself to answer. I returned them to Granddad. He asked me to secure them elsewhere. The lawyer's lips curled. Secure them? How? In your personal safe? I swallowed. Is that safe? I felt sweat bead on my upper lip. I looked at Granddad, who watched in silence. What was in that safe? My mind screamed. Suddenly, the bailiff's voice broke in. All rise. The jury filed back in, and Olivia gave me a nod that felt like a punch to the gut. As the judge prepared for closing statements, I realized something chilling. Nothing I'd said had moved her. She doesn't want the truth. Then I remembered a conversation overheard. Olivia whispering to her lawyer, "Make sure Grandpa backs me up. She's manipulated him too." My hands clenched around the edge of the podium. How deep does this go? And then, the judge cleared his throat again, and the courtroom fell silent. The tension was a living thing that pressed against my ribs. What happened next would decide everything I'd ever fought for. I felt my breath catch as the judge drummed his fingers on the bench. I watched the jury lean in, their expressions unreadable. I sensed my hands go ice cold. My pulse pounded like a war drum. I can't lose this, I told myself. Then I saw Rosa slip into the back of the gallery, her small form pressed against Granddad's broad shoulder. My heart lurched. What's she doing here? I recalled the morning I took Rosa to school, her head resting on my shoulder as she whispered, "Daddy, are you going to be okay today?" I smiled and ruffled her hair. "Of course, Pumpkin," I said. But inside, I felt more fragile than a porcelain doll. I must be strong for her. Back in the courtroom, I rose to deliver my closing argument. My voice wavered as I began. "Your Honor, esteemed jury, I stand before you as a son, a grandson, and a father who would never betray his own blood." I paused, swallowing against the lump in my throat. I felt sweat trickle down my spine. "Keep going, Michael." I focused on the shuffle of papers to steady my nerves. I recounted the nights I spent cataloging heirlooms, the careful ledger entries I'd made, the cassette recordings of Granddad's stories I'd preserved. I painted our history in vivid strokes. The oak chest my great-grandmother used to store her jewelry, the tear-stained letters she wrote on quality stationery. I described the pride in Granddad's eyes when I presented those artifacts neatly boxed and labeled. I watched the jurors nod slowly. Maybe they believe me. Then, Olivia's voice cut through the hush. "Objection, Your Honor," she said, calm and measured. The judge's gavel slammed down. Sustained. Relevance? Olivia's lawyer stood, a thin man with cold eyes. "Your Honor, the defendant's testimony is contradicted by physical absence. No items were recovered. We believe he's hiding them." The judge stared at me. Hiding them? I felt bile rise in my throat. I returned them to Granddad's safe, like he asked. My lawyer stood to defend me, but his words sounded hollow in my ears. I looked again at Granddad, whose face was ashen, eyes darting away. He's lost faith. I swallowed hard. No. It was then, in that moment of utter despair, that I heard a small voice behind me. "Daddy?" I spun around. Rosa stood trembling, clutching her school bag, tears glistening on her cheeks. The entire courtroom gasped. My heart shattered. Why did she come? I froze. The bailiff barked, "Remove the child." I reached for Rosa, but the bailiff's boots scraped the floor. Rosa's lip quivered. "Dad, don't let them take me." Her eyes pleaded. I felt my knees buckle. I wanted to scoop her into my arms and run. I failed her. The judge slammed his gavel again. "Order in this court." The silence returned, thick and suffocating. Rosa's sobs echoed off the high ceiling. I closed my eyes, willing myself to breathe. Focus. When I opened my eyes, I saw Olivia standing, expression softening for the first time. She hovered near the gallery rail as if torn. What is she thinking? I felt a flicker of hope. Then Olivia lowered her gaze, turning away. "She won't help me." The judge motioned for the bailiff to clear the gallery. Rosa was led out, still calling, "Daddy!" The double doors slammed. The sound echoed like a final blow. I sat back down, trembling, my world reduced to the wooden pew beneath my hands. I can't do this without her. The prosecutor rose for their final remark. Their voice was clinical. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you have witnessed the defendant's feeble attempts to mask the truth." They paced, highlighting the missing artifacts, the doctored bank statements, the grandfather's wavering credibility. I watched the jury's faces darken. "They're lost." I closed my eyes and saw Rosa's face, tear-streaked and terrified. My chest constricted. If I lose this, I lose her. I stood abruptly, knocking the pew. The courtroom gasped again. I felt every pair of eyes fix on me. I raised my voice, though it shook. I did not hide anything. I did everything my grandfather asked because I trusted him. I did it all for Rosa. My voice cracked. The judge pounded his gavel, silencing me. He turned to the jury. "Members of the jury, you will now retire to deliberate." The bailiff signaled, and the jurors filed out. The doors closed with a resonant thud. I collapsed into the pew, head in hands. "What's next?" My lawyer leaned in. "We have an uphill battle," he whispered. I nodded numbly. An uphill battle. I felt emptiness wash over me. I heard the shuffle of papers as the prosecution stamped their evidence. I felt the courtroom's gaze like a weight on my chest. This is the end. And then... My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. The next few moments would decide my fate, and the fate of my family. What hope remained in this collapsing world? I sat rigid on the witness stand, every muscle taut, as the courtroom doors creaked open. I felt the air shift. What now? I wondered, heart hammering. Then, she walked in, Ms. Delgado, the curator of the Hayes Family Heritage Museum. I blinked, at her silk scarf and solemn expression. Why is she here? I watched her approach the bench, the soles of her heels clicking against the polished marble floor. The judge's gavel hovered, uncertain. I felt my throat go dry. Please let this be the break I need. Ms. Delgado nodded to the bailiff, who handed her a slim silver USB drive. She raised her hand to speak, and I felt the courtroom hush around her like a spotlight. Your Honor, may I present new evidence? Her voice was steady, an anchor in a storm. The judge inclined his head. This is it. I saw Olivia's eyes flick to the flash drive, then to my grandfather's trembling hands. They didn't see this. Coming. My palms went cold. I gripped the edge of the stand. Don't drop the stand. Ms. Delgado inserted the USB into a laptop on the clerk's desk. The projector's light flickered, a pale rectangle on the drab courtroom wall. I heard the hum of ancient bulbs waking up. I watched the screen deepen to black. Show them. Then a video began. Shaky footage dated June 5, 2024, timestamped 08:32 p.m. The camera angle was from my grandfather's workshop, overhead, as if mounted on a shelf. I recognized the cluttered workbench, the jars of screws, the stack of ledgers. We always thought those cameras were broken. I leaned forward. The video showed Olivia, her hair pulled back, eyes focused, lifting the oak chest lid. She slipped her hand inside and pulled out the jade brooch. I felt my chest constrict. She stole them herself. My voice caught in my throat. I saw her close the lid and replace the key under a ceramic pot. The pot in the kitchen. The footage cut. To the next night. Olivia alone, opening the safe, slipping items into a cloth bag. The ivory hairpin. The silver locket. Then she looked up, straight into the camera's lens, and frowned. She knew she was being recorded. I swallowed hard, unable to tear my eyes away. This is undeniable. I heard a soft gasp from the gallery. Granddad's hand trembled on his knee. He must feel betrayed, too. And then the video shifted again. It showed Ms. Delgado herself retrieving those items the following morning, cataloging them with meticulous labels, and delivering them to the museum's vault. I felt relief wash over me, hot and bright. Rosa, we did it. Ms. Delgado paused the video and closed the laptop. Your Honor, these recordings prove beyond doubt that the defendant did not misappropriate any heirlooms. The true culprit is Olivia. Hayes. She handed the USB drive to the court clerk. Mic drop. I saw Olivia's face whiten, her lips parted, then pressed into a thin line. No mask now. I stood, heart pounding so loudly I thought the mic would pick it up. I began, voice unsteady but firm. Say something. But before I could speak, the courtroom erupted in murmurs. The judge pounded his gavel twice. Silence! When the hush fell again, I watched the jury exchange looks, eyes wide, fingers tightening on notepads. They're processing. Ms. Delgado approached the jury box. I can testify to the authenticity of these recordings, she said. I maintain these archives under oath. She gestured to the exhibit numbers labeled on the USB drive. The bailiff handed her a binder of affidavits, handwritten statements from the museum's security team confirming the camera's location and dates. I felt tears spring in my eyes, tears of triumph and release. We're vindicated. I glanced at Granddad. He sat rigid, head bowed. I wanted to rush to him, but I forced myself to stay, let him confront her. Then, Olivia rose, pale as chalk. She opened her mouth, but her lawyer placed a hand on her arm. She closed her mouth again. No excuse. The judge leaned forward. Ms. Hayes, he said, voice low. How do you explain this evidence? Olivia's shoulders sagged. I saw the fight drain out of her, the villain undone. I felt a trembling smile spread across my face. Truth wins. But my relief was tempered by a flicker of dread. Granddad still hadn't looked up. I turned to him. His eyes were filled with sorrow. Sorrow for his daughter, for the lies, for the crack in our family. What will he say? The judge tapped his pen on the table. We will recess briefly before final deliberations. The bailiff announced, All rise, and the jury filed out once more. The doors clicked shut. I exhaled a shaky breath. I saw Olivia slump into her seat, head bowed. I saw my lawyer offer a proud nod. I saw Ms. Delgado pack her laptop with grace. We did it. And then I heard Granddad's voice, hoarse and trembling, cutting through the silence. Michael. The word hung in the air like soft thunder. What will he say next? I rose to my feet as the courtroom doors opened once more. I felt my knees wobble beneath me, the wooden floorboards shifting under my weight. Steady, Michael. My lawyer's whisper in my ear was the only anchor I had. I felt the hush descend, heavy as a velvet curtain. Then the judge cleared his throat. I have reviewed the evidence, he began, voice resonant in the stillness. I felt the hush deepen, every breath in the room suspended. This is it, I thought, sweat trickling down my spine. The judge shuffled his papers, the soft crinkle sounding like distant thunder. I saw Olivia sit up, eyes glassy, her hands twisted in her lap. And I find, the judge continued, pausing to look at each juror as they filed back in, that the defendant, Michael Hayes, is wholly innocent of all charges relating to the misappropriation of family heirlooms. A collective exhale swept through the courtroom. I felt my body uncoil, the tension draining from my shoulders in a rush. I'm free. The judge's gavel tapped once, then twice, each sound like a heartbeat reborn. I further find that Ms. Olivia Hayes knowingly presented false evidence under oath and shall be held in contempt of court. Ms. Hayes, you are ordered to return all seized documents and artifacts to Mr. Hayes's custody immediately. I heard a murmur ripple through the gallery, relief, disbelief, triumph. I felt tears sting my eyes. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my trembling voice. I can't cry here. Then I saw Rosa slip through the crowd, her small hand reaching for mine. I stooped to hug her, the soft click of her shoes echoing in my ears. My little hero. Granddad stood behind us, shoulders slumped as if he carried the weight of regret. I turned to him, voice thick. Granddad, I managed. He looked at me, his eyes red-rimmed, and for the first time in weeks offered me a quivering smile. I felt my heart swell with a complex ache, relief tangled with sorrow. We're okay. The bailiff approached Olivia, who sat motionless, her head bowed. The bailiff's footsteps were slow, deliberate. I watched as they handed her a contempt citation. She didn't resist. She knows she lost. Then, the judge leaned forward, eyes locking onto mine. Mr. Hayes, he said softly, this court commends your perseverance and courage. You may collect your daughter and leave. This case is closed. He tapped the gavel, once, sharp. Court adjourned. Thunderous rustle as chairs scraped back. I felt a hand on my shoulder. Mr. Ellison, smiling so wide his eyes crinkled. I owe him everything. I nodded, voice barely a whisper. Thank you. I walked out into the late afternoon sun, Rosa's hand clasped in mine. The golden light spilled across the courthouse steps, warming my face. I inhaled deeply, the scent of freshly cut grass, the distant hum of traffic. I'm alive. Granddad followed, slower now, cane tapping a steady rhythm on the pavement. I slid an arm around his shoulders. Let's go home, I said. He leaned into me, silent but content. We're a family again. But as we reached the bottom step, I felt a sharp tug in my chest. I glanced back at the courthouse doors, half expecting another challenge to walk through. Then I remembered the empty safe in Granddad's workshop, the one he'd insisted I secure off-site. What happened to what he hid? I squeezed Rosa's hand again, her small fingers warm in mine. I squeezed Granddad's shoulder. This isn't over. And then, the distant click of a camera shutter, familiar and ominous, echoed in my mind. What could still be waiting in the shadows of our family's past? I learned that truth doesn't need permission. I discovered that even the strongest bonds can fray under lies, and that sometimes the fiercest battles are fought within our own bloodline. I realized that love alone isn't enough. It needs courage, persistence, and the willingness to confront darkness head-on. I understand now that family secrets, hidden in dusty ledgers or locked safes, have a way of surfacing at the worst possible moment. Yet they can also set us free. I feel my heart finally settling, the courtroom's glare replaced by the warm glow of home. I hold Rosa tight as she whispers, "I knew you'd win, Daddy." I cradle Granddad's trembling hand and promise to rebuild trust, one honest conversation at a time. I vow to keep that antique receipt and the USB drive locked away, not as, weapons, but as reminders of how far we've come. I hope my story reminds you. Never let fear silence your voice. Never let guilt cloud your judgment. And never forget that sometimes the greatest allies appear when you think all is lost. If you've ever felt trapped by a lie or fought to protect someone you love, drop a comment below. I want to hear your story. And if this courtroom confession gripped you, hit that like button to show your support. Share this video with anyone who needs a reminder that truth, no matter how buried, will always find its way to light. I'm Michael Hayes. Thank you for listening to my confession. Subscribe now and ring the bell so you never miss a moment of our journey toward justice and family redemption.